Department of Children and Family Services. Ms. McGee, when you're ready to begin.
All right. So now we're going to get into the Department of Children and Family Services executive budget for fiscal year 25. Again, my name is Julie McGee. So the total funding recommendation for fiscal year 25 is $928.9 million. You'll see the department is primarily funded by state general funds and federal funds, collectively $894 million, or 96% of the budget of the department's financing. On the right, you can see the budget for each program within the department. Management finance is 23% of the budget, child welfare is 37%, and family support is 40%. There are 3,760 authorized positions within the department. Here we have the department's organization. It's made up of one agency with 3 divisions, and we'll go over those divisions in the next few slides. Management finance provides the administrative function of the department, such as accounting, budget, human resource, systems, research, and analysis. They also are responsible for emergency preparedness, which provides mass care during disasters. The Division of Child Welfare contains intake and child protective services, family services, which provides services to families and children in their own home, foster care, which is protective services for children in the custody of DCFS, adoption, extended foster care, which is a voluntary program for youth up to age 21, and then juvenile trafficking. As of January of 2023, DCFS receives all calls regarding juvenile trafficking in Louisiana. The Division of Family Support is responsible for the SNAP, FITAP, STEP, and kinship care programs. They administer child support enforcement in the state. The Disability Determination provides services for individuals applying for disability assistance. And then Workforce Development has employment and training work to provide FITAP, SNAP, and child support participants with the tools to develop skills necessary to obtain employment and aid in self-sufficiency. So here we have the historical spending over the last 5 years. The average annual spending change from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 23 is 7.1%. And this is looking at the historical budget. It shows the actual expenditures for the last 5 years. In fiscal year 23, the unspent budget authority was about 5.5%, and this is primarily due to federal funds that were not utilized. Here we have the different sources of funding. Interagency transfers come from LDH for Medicaid, Department of Education for child care reimbursement payments, and then from GOSEP for emergency preparedness operations. The self-generated revenues are largely made up of child support enforcement services, parental contributions, state central registry fees, marriage licensing fees, child welfare licensing fees. The statutory dedications are from the Fraud Detection Fund and the Continuum of Care Fund. And then federal funds are the largest means of financing for the department, and we'll take a deeper look at that in the next slide. So the department's budget is primarily consists of federal funds. For fiscal year 25, that's right at $601 million. The state dollars are used as a matching requirement for each type of federal dollar. And this slide shows that the state funds that are required to draw down the federal funds. Overall, you can see for the federal funds that are shown on this slide, the $567 million of federal funds shown on the chart require $236 million of state general funds to draw down the funds. Here we're looking at the funding comparison of 24 to 25. We see that the state general fund is increasing by $4 million. This is due to increasing the child welfare to expand the capacity of therapeutic foster care, provide child welfare offices in Baton Rouge and New Orleans with supplemental staffing, rate increases in congregate care, and advocacy services for victims of human trafficking. This is offset by a decrease in the funding needed for the CWIS program. CWIS is the Comprehensive Child Welfare Information System. The system will be in the planning phases through fiscal year 25, and then later on in the presentation we have a slide on the IT systems, and we'll give an update on what CWIS is. The statutory dedications are decreasing by $1 million due to one-time funding for the Continuum of Care program, and federal funds are decreasing by $12 million. Increase in child welfare, again, to expand the capacity of the therapeutic foster care, provide supplemental staffing in Baton Rouge and New Orleans, rate increases in the congregate care. Then there's a $6.2 million increase built into that for the electronic healthy incentive program, which provides SNAP recipients with rebate incentives for purchasing healthier food options. And those increases are offset by decreases for attrition, and then the retirement rate, and then also for carry forwards that carried forward 23 funds into 24. Now we're going to look at the funding comparison for the programs within the department. You can see in fiscal year 25, the funding for child welfare is increasing. This is primarily due to the increases in the therapeutic foster care, the rate changes for the congregate care, the additional staffing in New Orleans and Baton Rouge. And then we can see that family support is decreasing primarily due to the carry forwards of the 23 funds into 24. And then also in fiscal year 24, there's a line item appropriation for family violence and continuum of care that wasn't reappropriated in 25. Here we see the bulk of the expenditure at DCFS are in other charges, interagency transfers, and personnel services. We'll take a closer look at other charges and interagency transfers in a little bit. So slide 15 gives us a closer look at the expenditures by category, comparing the fiscal year 25 recommended amount to the current year's budget and the prior year's actual spending. You'll see the areas of the largest change are personnel services. Other charges are increasing by $5.5 million, and then interagency transfers are decreasing by $10.5 million. So the personnel service decreasing by $4.1 million. Other charges are increasing by $5.5 million. A few of the major changes are an increase in, again, the congregate care, the cash assistance programs, an increase to expand the therapeutic foster care beds. And these increases are offset by decreases for the 23 carry forwards into 24, and then a decrease in the TANF initiative and a decrease in case management for the STEP program. Other charges and interagency transfers are decreasing due to a decrease in the amount of funds that are transferred to Department of Education for the LA4 program. So here we have the breakdown of what's contained in the interagency the interagency transfer and the other charges. Other charges are primarily what's used to run the federal program. So you have foster care, TANF, the child support enforcement, everything that's used to run those programs go through other charges. Interagency transfers, the main one of those is which transfers to OTS, and we'll take a deeper dive into that in a minute. And then also you have what's transferred to education for LA4 and then to Department of Health. So here we have a breakdown of the IT projects. What's on the left is the spending since 2017 for the development and implementation of different projects, and then on the right is the maintenance and operation. So in fiscal year 25, it's budgeted $113 million on IT initiatives. The integrated eligibility is in its operation and maintenance phases. This program is used for eligibility determination and benefit issuance for the SNAP, STEP, and the cash benefit program within the family services. The CSE modernization program, that's for child support enforcement. It's in the development and implementation phases. They believe they just started on that one last year. The FileNet is in the development and implementation phases as well, and that one is the department's electronic document management system. So CWIS, I'll give an overview of CWIS for an update of where it is now. CWIS is the Comprehensive Child Welfare Information System. It is going to be a management system for child welfare. They currently have, I think, about 7 or 8 systems now, and this is going to make them all into one. DCFS started planning for this new system in fiscal year 16. They entered into a contract in June of 19 for the development of the system. The contract was canceled in November of 22. As of now, the RFP has been submitted, but it hasn't been issued. In fiscal year 24, DCFS spent approximately $837,000 preparing the RFPs for the project. The budget for CWIS for fiscal year 24 was $13.2 million. In December of 23, DCFS completed an in-house BA7 to move $9.3 million of the funds from the CWIS project to child welfare to aid in the child welfare stabilization. This BA7 did not come before JLCB. It was not required. By statute, it does allow them to move 1% of their budget between programs. So basically, all that said, CWIS is pretty much in the same spot. When they were here last year, they were debating whether to enter in the NASPO project with RFP. The RFP was submitted to OSP, but it has not been issued yet. It's back in the planning development stages. DCFS management is prepared to give an update of what the plan is moving forward. And I do want to say all the decisions leading up to this point were made December and prior. The current administration took over in January. I think the new undersecretary's only been here less than a month. So all that led up here was not by the current administration that is here today. And then you can see what's been spent on it up to this point. The chart at the bottom, up to this point, it's a little over $45 million that's been spent on it. Next, we're looking at personnel information over the next few slides. As of January 29th, DCF has had 263 vacant positions. 50% were in child welfare. 40% of the vacancies were in family services. 10% were in management and finance. On the right, we have the historical average salary. You can see that the salaries for DCFS is historically between $5,000 to $8,000 less than the average state employee. Then at the bottom, we have the positions compared to the salaries. And you can see the rise in salaries in 2023, and that's due primarily to special interest rates and premium pay that was implemented to help the retention efforts. Here we have the turnover history, and the turnover history for DCFS has historically been lower than that of the state, dating back to 2019. The first box on the right is the top 5 positions that were vacated with the largest number of separations. And then I added, since turnover in child welfare is such an issue, I added the one on the bottom to show the turnover within those positions in child welfare. The next couple slides are going to show some program performance. Here we're looking at Division of Child Welfare. So the line at the top is the number of investigations, and then the second line is, the line at the top is the number of reports of abuse or neglect. The second line is investigations, and then the bars at the bottom are the family served, foster care, and adoption. And if you look at the change from 22 to 23, the reports of abuse or neglect didn't change that much. It's less than a 1% change of 22 to 23. But the number of investigations went up by almost 6,000, which was about a 29% increase. During 22-23, when it was catastrophes that happened in DCFS, they made policy changes as to what reports, how those investigations were handled and all that. That is what has driven this increase in investigations, which then you can see drives the increased number of children in foster care and a number of families served. Now we're looking at SNAP. The monthly SNAP benefits, the line at the top is the average monthly benefits issued, and then the bars are the average monthly recipients. And you can see between 20 and 23, the amount of benefits went up exponentially. During the public health emergency, maximum allotment of benefits were issued, and then that went away in March of 23, I believe. This did not change eligibility, so this is different than what we heard in Medicaid. Everybody that was eligible is still eligible. They still had the eligibility requirements. It was just the amount of benefits that were issued that had changed. Here we're looking at cash assistance of FITAP and kinship care. The FITAP is on the top, and then the kinship care is on the bottom. The lines are the benefits issued, the bars are the number of recipients. And you can see the benefits for both programs went up in 23. The kinship care benefits doubled. They went from $225 a month to $450 a month at that time. And then the FITAP was increased to the national average. That concludes my presentation. I don't believe the secretary is here, but we do have Toby Como, the chief of staff, and Rebecca Harris, the undersecretary that is here.
All right. Thanks, Julie.
Any comments?
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. Thank you so much. Toby Como, Chief of Staff, DCFS. The secretary is not going to be here. I thought he might be here, but he's not. He's actually at one of our first of what we hope is many foster care community events here in Baton Rouge. So if you have heard the secretary speak before, he's outlined a number of priorities. I'll just kind of touch on those really quick. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time giving you guys a presentation. I know you have questions, but it's really focused on a very small number of things. First of all, being frontline staff, specifically in child welfare. We just talked about the turnover challenges. You saw the personnel information. You've heard prior administrations, leaders come before this committee and others and talk about this challenge. You hear other agencies talk about this challenge. For us, it's very acute in child welfare because of the work that we do. But that is one of the primary focuses, and it really is the main thing, right? And so we will constantly kind of tell each other we're keeping the main thing. And right now for us, it's that. But that goes for frontline positions in all of our programs, honestly. The second part is focusing on relationships and communities around foster parents. We have challenges in the foster care system with placement, with the availability of foster parents and foster homes. And we know that the best way to recruit a foster parent is to treat our current foster parents as well as we can. So that is really part of what the event today is designed around. Here in Baton Rouge, we'll be doing that across the state in all of our regions, hopefully. The other part of what we're focusing on is dealing with employees again, and the experience that they have, and to create an agency and an environment where the morale for our employees is such that they will stay with us. We spend a lot of money. We spend a lot of time trying to hire employees, a lot of effort and everything associated with that. But it doesn't matter if they don't stay. It doesn't matter if they stay despite the environment that they're in. So we're actively working on all of those things surrounding that to make DCFS a place that people want to come to, but more importantly, want to stay to. I don't think that in a lot of cases, people don't accidentally show up here. I think people come here because they're drawn to the mission. That's how I ended up here. I did not start in social services, but over the course of my career, the work here drew me, and I want to spend my time and really the prime time of my career helping families and children, so in the ways that I can. The other thing is understanding trauma and having a trauma-informed workplace for our employees, educating each other, learning from our communities, learning from our families, and understanding the role that trauma plays. It's a common thread through all the work and the experiences that we do. So I have Rebecca Harris, our undersecretary, is here with me at the table. We have our leadership here that can answer questions as well. I do appreciate the shout out about decisions made in a prior administration. I will say some of us have been here in other roles. All of us are new to our roles now, but we are taking this time, and we've taken the first couple months of this administration to really evaluate what we're doing. Evaluate decisions that were made, evaluate structures that are in place, and trying to make sure that those things align with these shorter set of priorities. I think in the past, DCFS has tried to do a lot of things. We have not always done them all well. And so I think the more streamlined focus on this set of priorities, understanding that we have decisions to make in terms of efficiencies, we're looking at that through all of our programs, and that's something we'll talk about here today. Happy to be here. Every time we come here, I have said that this is an opportunity for us to work together, to partner. We view this committee as a partner in this work. We can't do this without y'all, so we're very thankful and appreciative of what you do. I know that there's new members on this committee too, so we're going to learn together. And so happy to answer any questions that you may have.
You got questions? Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome. And I liked your comments about evaluating system structures and priorities so you do them well, because I think over the past few years there have been a number of things that weren't done the way I would consider well. They weren't done well. I would like just to go back, and I didn't hear you say, to page 16, and you had a decrease in case management of about $3 million, a decrease in TANF initiatives at about $4 million. Can you tell me a little bit about those and why there's a decrease in funding?
So you're asking specifically about the 3.9 million for TANF initiatives, and which one again? I'm sorry.
The one right before it, the case management for STEP. Y'all can send me that information
Yeah, we'll have to
if
find.
you want to.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think there was some realignment within some of those funding streams based upon some prior work. So preparing for 25, I think they realigned some of that. So we can find that out for you
Okay.
and get that to
I
you.
have another question, but I know Rep. Freeman is going to ask it. So
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to my wonderful seatmate, because we just had a conversation before you all sat down at the table. And thanks for being there. My question that is similar to hers, and I'm really concerned about the cut to the domestic violence centers, and I think the cut was $7 million total. How that splits out and where it came from, I don't recall the details there. But what can you speak to that? Is there anything we can do because if we're really committed as a legislative and an executive branch together to addressing crime, as much as mental health and addiction, domestic violence sits right in there. And I'm one who has a family member who was killed because of domestic violence in 2020 in Youngsville, Louisiana, my first cousin. So not that it wasn't important before that Lori was murdered by her abuser, but it is very important if we are really going to address mental health and maternal mortality and addiction, that we find a way to put that $7 million back. That's my question. What are your suggestions to us? Because I would hope that my colleagues would help me find that $7 million.
Sure, and thank you for sharing that, Representative Freeman. So we the $7 million was added last year by the legislature. So as a legislative instrument, $7 million last year. So that's non-recurred in this proposed budget. There was an additional amount of funding on top of that seven, right? So I think we've averaged about $8 million of funding for domestic violence across a combination of funding streams. So some state general funds, some TANF funds, some stat dead fund, and some self-generated, I think, family violence fund. I probably messed that up. But it's like a combination of things. So that $7 million, while that's not there, there is continued funding, and we've been working with the coalition. That's going to continue. I mean, we had some questions about that. You may have seen that in the media about, is DCFS cutting funding. We have no intention of reducing the other funding that we were providing. So the 7 is not in the budget. So that would need
But it was in
to
the
be
budget
added.
for the 24, the current budget.
Correct. Yeah, it was added as a one-time. My understanding is it was added as a one-time funding to begin some of the expansion of the shelters. The understanding of whether it was one time or the communication of whether it was one time, I don't know if that got mixed up with prior leaders. The result of it is that it's not in the proposal right now. So that would need to be essentially added by the legislature.
Okay, and I don't know either what the one time, whether that was communicated in that way or not. I don't recall. But what I will say is that $7 million means a certain number of people, and I don't know the number. So I'm thinking about the victims of domestic violence who need that bed space for themselves or their family members. So whatever part I can be in part of a conversation to restore that. I mean, I'd hope that the governor and all my colleagues would see that when we don't fund that, we end up with more criminal justice problems, more mental health issues, children who are in foster care, et cetera, et cetera. It's just a terrible spiral for any family in the state to be part of. So that was my question on domestic violence. And the other question I have, and Secretary Matlack and I have had conversations about this, but I am still very upset about the $3.5 million, and he knows that, that was to be used for the EBT funds, which was a $70 million to states, because I understand his argument about self-sufficiency, and he and I have had numerous conversations, and I know you've even texted me, Toby. So thank you for the communication from your department. But these are the most vulnerable kids in our state, and I don't know the actual number, and you probably do, your department does. It is essential to our state that they have food throughout the summer, and the programs that exist are not enough. I can't believe our grocery stores owners aren't out on the front steps yelling at us, because that's funds that go straight back into the communities. I implore you, I think from what I understand, it's too late for us to deal with getting the federal funding, but for us to spend a small amount of money, we are helping the most vulnerable kids in the state. And I have a very small population. I probably have the smallest population of beneficiaries of these programs in the state. In fact, I remember a colleague saying that to me one day, look, yours are so low. I said, it doesn't matter. My district still really cares about the rest of the state, and they're passionate about making sure those are available, because throughout the state, when those kids do not have the resources they're used to getting with their lunch and breakfast daily, which sometimes are their only meals, we are holding them back from being self-sufficient. So the idea, and this is me more of a statement than a question, the idea that we would say that about a child is very disheartening and upsetting to me and the people I represent. So anything that your agency can do to look forward to putting that funding back into the future budget, because it's a serious amount of money that can be helpful to the most vulnerable children.
And you're right. The secretary's not here. He has been pretty vocal about his decisions related to this. So I won't speak for him, but I will reiterate some of the things he has said. In addition to all the other work that we're doing, right? All the other programs that exist, we're looking for ways to continue to expand other things, to partner. I know we were having conversations locally around in various cities with what other options are there that we can potentially expand or link up to some of the other things we do, specifically on the workforce development side. But there are other programs too that we are communicating and trying to share information about. We have there's a program called Grow the Good. Chairman McFarland's very...
I know all about it. I co-authored it with him.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm very well aware of that.
And so programs like that we are going to continue to market and communicate, and also to measure. I think we got this question in our oversight committee. What have we done, right? So like, how are we measuring what's actually happening? He also has said, and I will reiterate this, it was in the budget request. We didn't get the money, so the money's not there. If we had the money, he would probably use it for what he has said, child welfare, right?
Yeah, he did tell me all of
right,
that.
so
but it's good for you to be on the record.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think that's part of what we want to do. I mean, we want to be transparent and have this conversation. But he also has said if the money's appropriatable, we will run the program. So I think similar to what we just talked about, should the legislature, should the governor decide to put that money in there, we will move forward and operate that. At this point, it's not there. I know there's a legislation filed to appropriate that. So at that time, I think we would see. But we continue to focus on all opportunities. I mean, our mission is to protect children from abuse and neglect, to provide self-sufficiency for families, and to protect people in times of disaster. That's important to us, and that does not stop for us if other things happen or other things don't get done or other things, and it's difficult. I mean, there are times. I mean, this is DCFS is not for the faint of heart. I mean, working in this agency, I mean, it can be at times very difficult because of things we see. But that mission is what we talked about at the beginning. Those core values, those core mission, like we're going to continue to focus on all those. So there may be other creative things that we come up with, and I think that's part of the ongoing dialogue and the partnership with y'all to figure out where this goes. So, if he was here, he'd probably say a few more things, but I think the dialogue is ongoing, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, I appreciate that. I would like to be continued in that dialogue and conversations in committee or outside of committee, because these are our most vulnerable decisions. I mean, these are our most vulnerable citizens, and they're not of voting age, and so they can't come sit at the table and testify that they didn't get their their meal. So that's what I'm speaking for them. I'm speaking on their behalf. The last question I have for you is, in the current administration, I don't know that I've ever asked DCFS this question, but what are the programs that are really focused, and what coordination do you all have with LDH on the maternal care piece? I mean, I know we have the Alternatives to Abortion clinic thing that funds the pregnancy centers, which I don't actually think is beneficial, in my opinion, for TANF funds. But what other programs exist, because we do have such a high rate of maternal mortality and infant mortality, and then some of these kids are born into foster care, and they may have come from a mother who was addicted to something, so we have a vulnerable population that you're starting to take care of from the beginning of life. What coordination do you all have with the public health to make sure that those moms, because I know you're seeing some of the same people they need to see, and just came to my mind because they were at the table a few minutes ago saying they're trying to be better. So I just wanted to know where's the crossover between you all?
Absolutely. I don't know if you have anything specific on that from your LDH days. I will say, so we've had some very early conversations with the secretary, the deputy secretary, and chief of staff and their team to better align the work that we're both doing. I mean, we are across the street from each other. Our buildings are legit. I walked across the street yesterday for a meeting. And so I think that I don't know specifically the answer to that question programmatically, but I know from a organizational standpoint, and more importantly, the coordinating between the two agencies, we're beginning to have those conversations. I think the goals are there for both of us, and they're aligned.
I'm glad to hear that, because I don't know, I've never asked that question before, how much they were there before or not. And we all know that there were a lot of problems with DCFS during the last term that I was here.
Correct.
So I do appreciate Secretary Matlock and your approach to addressing the most vulnerable children.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to remind members to stick to the budget, please. If you have a policy statement, please do that afterwards, but right now I'd like to stick with the budget. Representative Zarang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And speaking of the budget, God bless you guys, because, what y'all do it is critical and it is important, and the funding and some of these people, I see the vacancies and the fact that you have, so in terms of the number of vacancies you have, but what these specialists have to deal with in these homes is a challenge, and I just appreciate the fact that they're there. But Toby, I also appreciate the fact that said you want to learn, so we all want to learn together. So let's learn from our mistakes, hopefully. And one of those mistakes is the CWIS program, obviously, and I know that happened before you guys. But it started in 16, 19 there was a contract. You heard Julie. 22 was canceled. Now it's out on RFP. To date, we spent so we've CWIS'd $45 million of state dollars on this program. And we're back to the beginning.
It's not all state dollars, it's 50-50 match, but it's half state dollars.
Okay, well, it's still dollars. It's still tax dollars, federal or state. It's still money that is not going to anything other than who knows where it went. And which brings up a whole nother issue in terms of the responsibility that OTS, I frankly believe, and they're not here at the table, and they will be, but I think OTS bears some responsibility, and that's another discussion for another day. But where, in terms of the CWIS program, are we, the intentions of the department now that you're there, and what are we completely revamping? Is just an RFP? Are we just going over and redeveloping the RFP again, or are we going to completely reevaluate the process? Because within 2016, there's a lot that has changed, and there's a lot of innovation that has occurred, and hopefully we'll take advantage of that. But could you please update us on where we are and how we're going to improve this or not repeat what we did?
Yes, good morning. Rebecca Harris, DCFS. We agree with you that we do not want to repeat the mistakes that have been made in the past. We don't have an RFP that's issued at this time. We're still working through the process of developing the RFP and evaluating that. There are 4 components that we are looking at procuring, but as an agency, we're taking a step back to look and see, is that the most advantageous to the agency to have individual RFPs? We are having conversations. We've had a few with OTS, our partners over there already, to talk about how the technology should be implemented in Louisiana. I know NASPO is a question of fund.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but they're telling you how it should be. But weren't they the original ones to tell y'all what to do in terms of how it was going to be applied? I think y'all told them what you needed, but OTS's responsibility was to tell you how to accomplish that. And so 49 million, and we still yet to achieve that. And it's not, again, I appreciate it. It's not you, but we're relying on OTS to tell us now how we're going to improve what we weren't able to accomplish.
So OTS would help us in understanding how the technology architecture should be. And so there's a role for the agency, and that's determining what the business needs as far as the CWIS system, making something that's compliant with all of the federal rules related to that. OTS would help us in understanding what the technology architecture looks like, because we at DCFS, by and large, our skill set is that of providing social services to families and children, not being technologists. So we would rely on them for that expertise, but the agency will own the procurement.
The procurement to do, again, the original intent and where are we now, or is the goal of what CWIS was trying to accomplish in terms of integrating and getting a better handle of how y'all are able to manage cases and caseloads and making sure we integrate with other aspects. Is that still the goal, and is it still achievable, or are we with what was originally intended to what we're going to now?
So it is the goal, and it is still achievable, but the way that we're going to go about that may change a little bit. And that would be through how we RFP it. So we have right now 4 RFPs that are in development, one for DDI, which is the design, development, implementation of the system itself, one for PMO, which would be the project management office, one for QA/QC, which is quality, and one for IVNV, the independent verification and validation. The DDI and IVNV are both required. The PMO and QA/QC, we're looking at maybe doing that as an agency-wide versus project-specific, because we do have the child support modernization effort that will be coming behind this, and we want to make sure that all of our technology modernization is done well. So we're looking at making sure that the RFPs are going to be most advantageous to the state, and that they follow the best procurement method so that we have good cost.
So this process, or at least there are other states that are utilizing some similar system.
Yes.
And there have been some discussions with some of these other states, and I hope that we are taking what we're learning from what some of the other states, their successes, and what has worked in those states. Are we utilizing that in terms of the development of the RFPs as well?
Yes. So in June of 2023, we did a market analysis to look at where other states were. We looked at 5 other states particularly to see where they were in the process and how they had obtained their systems, whether they used off-the-shelf technology, whether they customized a system themselves. What we found, Arizona was a state that built their own system entirely, and it cost them about $80 million. For other states who have used COTS or SAS for their system, it's costing them around the $20 to $30 million range. But we are going to do another analysis now, because I wasn't here for that one, or our administration wasn't here for that one. We are going to look to the other states again and see what they're doing, how they're doing it, and what states have been successful, and then learn from other states who have had failures similar to ours.
Okay. Again, they built theirs for $80 million, and it's working. We've spent $45 and have nothing. But again, it's
Agree.
So the RFPs are in development.
Mm-hmm.
When do we anticipate the RFPs to be out on the street, or when do you believe we'll start? Because the RFPs themselves are going to take at least close to probably a year, I assume, in terms of based on previous experience. But that aside, could you give me a timeline in ultimately getting this implemented?
So the timeline right now, not assuming taking the pause to reevaluate to make sure that the RFP is in line with the vision of the administration that is here now. The expected RFP release date is later this year with a contract in place next year in 2025.
Okay. We can only hope. Yes.
And I'll just add too, not to on the technical side, but I mentioned before. I mean, this is something that we started talking about on the first week, right, coming in. So the secretary, we briefed him, had information, brought the leaders in. I agree. I mean, we look at what was done, and we look at what we have, and it's not okay. Like, it's not okay. And it's not okay because our employees need the technology, right? But it's also not okay because of the wasted time and the wasted resources. So we are focused on using all of the resources that we get really well. As an internal, we talk about it every single day. That was not always a conversation that took place, right? There are all these kind of big ideas, but the nuts and bolts and the details of these projects, whether it's a technology project, whether it's a statewide hiring project, whether it's a new facility for placement, whatever, the details of these things matter. And so for us, as we're looking at this type of project, we're having the same evaluation we're looking at when we're looking at contracts, when we're looking at programs, when we're looking at positions. We want to use everything that we have well in the manner in which it was given to us. And so I think the goal for us moving forward, like Rebecca said, is to get this system done as well as we can, resourced properly, mindful of the resources that are given to us in the context of everything else that's going on financially with the state, as fast as we can. And so if that requires us to think about it differently, we're having those conversations and we're thinking about it differently. There are a number of times, I think, when people, structures or whatever, tell us you can't do that. They'll say this isn't a good idea, like we should do it this way. We're challenging those things internally. It's important to us that we move these things forward, specifically this project forward, because it's taken so long. And so I know there's a lot of questions that have come up, and so it is from the secretary's standpoint, the credibility of the department. It's important, right? So we're going to do what we say we're going to do. We're going to be transparent about if it doesn't work. And I think we're going to have more honest conversations about this moving forward.
And I appreciate that. And it's about accountability. And to that end, Representative Freiberg was asking in a couple questions in regard to TANF funds and the accountability in terms of where the dollars are going. And I think that's a concern. And I know y'all are new, but moving forward and being able to track and account for those dollars, which are so important, is just one important aspect for the department, but also as us in terms of we're utilizing the funds and maximize, which I know y'all are working and trying to do, but I think those are the things, in addition to the other programs, that we can work on the accountability aspect as well. So thank you. Good luck. And keep us posted. Hopefully y'all will get the other
Yes, sir.
programs going. That's enough.
Thank you. Representative Marcel.
Question, page 19. You're showing 263 vacant positions. Can you tell me what that's attributed to, the high number? Because I know it had decreased at one point. What's going on with the positions?
So it's, I would say it's attributable to a couple of things. And I'll give you some anecdotal information as well. So, I had the opportunity last year to help co-lead that huge statewide push that we did in terms of hiring, right? So we did 14 or 15 or 17, I don't even remember, there were so many hiring fairs around the state. We made nearly 700 job offers. I think we hired about 300 people. At one point, the vacancies were over 450, right? So 263 is high, 450 is much higher, right? Some of this is due to, I believe, and what we've seen is having a steady focus on this, right? So we did this big push. We brought a lot of people in, thought that we were sort of stabilized from the standpoint of the hiring and the vacancies, and took the foot off the gas a little bit, right? And I think what we learned was that that is something that we cannot do, right? So the progress that we made by doing things differently, which is exactly what we did, we completely changed how we hired, what we required, specifically on the child welfare side, but operationalizing our, recruiting strategy a little bit differently. And now that we've come in, we've seen a dip in certain regions. We have a whole year's worth of data. At the time, we had a short, a half year's worth of data. And you keep in mind in child welfare specifically, from a caseworker standpoint, you hire them today, it's going to be 6 months before they're fully trained to take the cases in the field.
What's the typical salary?
So it is around for a caseworker at the entry level, it is around 44,000 that's a combination of base pay and there's some premium pay tacked onto it through some of the civil service rules. But on the front end, at that point, the vacancies were so high, we were hiring a lot of people. And what we found is when they got through training, when they hit the field, they were like, I'm out. Like, I don't want to do this. This is too difficult. I don't want to do this anymore. And so from a strategic standpoint, thinking about who we're hiring, do we understand what we really need to get somebody through training, properly trained in the field so that they can stay long enough that we can reduce these caseloads. Because what happens is they leave and then the caseloads just kind of stack on top of each other for those who are here. What we are also seeing
Do we have, and I don't want to cut you off, but
Sure, yeah.
I know they're trying to go eat. So do we have
Sorry.
a backlog? Do we have a backlog of cases because of that, because of the vacancies?
So we do in certain areas, and so the caseload issue is an issue, and so we have redirected resources specifically in CW to address critical regions. So we have 4 regions where the turnover was very high: Baton Rouge, Covington, Thibodaux, and Alexandria. We're doing hiring events in all those. We had one in Baton Rouge last week. We had 17 vacancies. We offered 17 jobs. We actually have 30 additional people in a pool to pull from. That's going to directly correlate to reducing that backlog of cases. So,
And Representative Freeman have already touched on the domestic violence issue that I'm also concerned about. I'm a victim of domestic violence, so any funding that's reduced in that area seriously concerns me. So I'd like to have some additional conversations with y'all, maybe a sidebar, to see how do we restore the funding to domestic violence. We ranked very high in domestic violence cases. I actually offered legislation to create a domestic violence court in EBR to address some of these issues. So I don't want to see us take a step backwards. And when we take funding away from a much-needed program, I don't want to see an increase in domestic violence because of the lack of funding for the programs that we really need to address. So thank Representative Freeman for bringing that up. And my final comment will be on EBT, of which she has a small number in her district that are on EBT, but I have a large number. I'm in EBR, and a large portion of my district are recipients of EBT. So I'm definitely concerned about how do we feed them in the summertime with the additional time that they're off from school. I'd like to see how how we could address it, and I understand the deadline is passed, but if there's something that we could do, some innovative thinking perhaps, of how do we feed kids. We're talking about the most vulnerable people in our population, and I just simply don't get it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Lyons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One quick question. I know Representative Marcel talked about the vacant positions, and we've been going over this for several years.
Yeah.
And we looked at the number of the cases there and the history of child protection investigations, and we know that staffing is a big issue with that piece. And we always said in this committee that, we know that salaries were very, very important for, turnover was a big issue with that. And we, several times that the department said they were doing studies to figure out how to raise salaries appropriate, at least in this area that we can try to be competitive and so forth. How has that changed since, the last 2 years since we've been talking about this?
So we always end up talking about pay, right? I mean, we always end up talking about salary and pay. And so I will say a couple of things. Like what we've seen is that the current pay is not necessarily prohibitive from us hiring, right? It's not necessarily prohibitive of keeping people, but pay also always becomes an issue, right? So, I mean, if we're looking at this from a long-term sustainability standpoint, we know there's some work that we need to do. So a couple of years ago, we were able to increase the entry-level pay to what it is now. Like I just referenced, I think it was around 44, 45 with all the combinations of things. We've worked really closely with civil service. These are all classified positions in this program. And last year worked really closely with them to do a broad assessment of child welfare specifically. There are other areas in the department that we did additional work for as well, on the economic stability side, on the child support side, and now in our workforce development programs and our management and finance areas, HR, fiscal, legal. So there's been a lot of work around it. Specifically for child welfare, though, that assessment, we didn't finish it. We kind of got to the point where we had some options, and it was at the very end of the administration. So we're picking those conversations up again. We're planning to meet with civil service very soon, but that comes also with a cost. So that was part of the issue, not being able to necessarily project what it would cost to do and what the options would be through civil service. So that work is ongoing. We know it's something that we need to work on, and we're committed to having that conversation. And that would be something that if that happens, if that happens during this session, I mean, that's a conversation that we have to talk about. But But that is something that we're working on.
When can we expect some form of report or some form of data to say that, we've gathered this much information and here is our target for what we're going to do and what that would be?
I think we need to have this meeting that we're going to have with civil service. I think once we meet with them, with our administration now, and our leaders who are in place now, I think we'll have a better idea. So I don't think I can answer that yet, but once we have that, we can absolutely share what that plan looks like.
And I want to say here, before my colleagues that, when we talk about child welfare and the long game, if you will, into the trajectory of those kids coming in and out of foster care, if it's those kids, but doing the investigations where we are, the end point to that has been a crutch in child welfare in the state for a long time. So you're right, money is the issue in a lot of cases. So I want to be able to say that we need to fund certain things a certain way based upon the reality of what the results show. But we look at these slides, and my fifth year looking at those slides and looking at the number of positions and coming, going, and turnover, and we know that salary is not always the factor. Work conditions, morale, some of the things that individuals have to see and deal with in that particular case. We understand those are the ills of the job, but some way we got to find a way to get people in place to do that. So as soon as you all finish your criteria that you're working on, I'm begging you, please share with this body. And I know from a man to a woman here, we don't have a problem funding the protection of those kids and how we can get to a better point with outcomes for that. So if you get that to us as soon as you can, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all very much for being here today. My question is budget related, but it's kind of construct related too. I have some curiosity about how you manage your budget in the context of domestic violence shelters. Do we have enough of those around the state? I know we've been talking about domestic violence. I'm very ignorant on this, but I'm very concerned about this because although Louisiana is a small state, there's a long way between some of our towns. Mm-hmm. And for people who live in the country, when you have someone who needs shelter and they say, oh, you live in Manny, well, just drive to Shreveport. Or you live in DeRidder, well, just drive to Lake Charles. Life doesn't really work that way. And I'm just curious if y'all have a macro level game plan for that, or if that's something that's on your radar scope, because very, very concerned about shelters.
So I don't think I can answer that question. I think that we, through the work that we've been doing to determine what's funded, what's not funded, I think that is a question for some of our partners. So we contract, essentially with local organizations. So that's something that I think we can pull together. I mean, we talked about it here. We're going to be looking at this. I think we can get some of that information together and educate you on that and bring it back to this committee.
A couple of things. I'm David Matlock, Mr. Chairman. Very nice to meet you. I was with a group of foster parents, and the main thing's keeping the main thing. It is no deprivation or of the importance of this committee. Y'all are fundamentally, foundationally important to the state of Louisiana, to the mission of the Department of Children and Family Services. Foster parents are very, very important as well. Interestingly, the Shreveport shelter is run by the folks from Manny.
Okay.
And they do a great job. But it's a law enforcement issue because the line officers, the police officers, the sheriffs, deputies, they're the ones that have to deal with that situation and be able to tell this family where they can go to get shelter or safety from a domestic violence situation. And so geographic location is a big deal. It permeates services. It permeates mental health services, substance abuse recovery services, many other SNAP benefits, and so forth. You have to, and driver's licenses. We live in a virtual world, but warm handoffs and warm contact is where a lot of the service has to be delivered, and certainly in that area. So we are supportive of that. We also want to keep the main thing, and be able to allocate our resources in a solid way to protect children. We've got three fundamental missions. One is to protect children from abuse and neglect and abandonment by their caretakers, by their parents. Mission number two is to help individuals and families become self-sufficient. Mission number three is to provide shelter in mass emergencies. Those are our three principal missions. And if we're not allocating resources to take care of those things, then we have to take a hard look at ourselves. And we are trying to reallocate our services to line level programming to be able to get services to line workers in all of those areas, all three of those areas that I mentioned. And domestic violence is an issue, and we want to be a good partner with the outside agencies, non-governmental organizations, with the legislature to address those issues. But, we all need to recognize proximity is existential for some folks when it comes to those issues. And I appreciate your interest.
Well, thank you.
And I was born the first 2 years of my life in Manny. So that's where I get this wonderful, sort of sophisticated, Eastern-sounding voice inflection.
Well, thank you all. I will certainly stay in touch on this. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Members, what I did was I asked staff, because I've had multiple emails on the domestic violence money. So I had staff go back and pull the budget from last year, HB1. That $7 million was added in the Senate in an amendment in committee, in finance. And the purpose of that was, and this is a specific in the budget, one-time funding for non-reoccurring special legislative projects. So that $7 million purpose was not for reoccurring dollars for administration, although I agree we need to look at that. It was for specifically to build more shelters. So I didn't know that, you didn't know that, but this is what I've had staff working on since that conversation has come up by multiple members. And I know that domestic violence advocates will be here for public testimony. But I want that to be on our minds as we hear this. And look, and it's not just with this $7 million that we're hearing this. This is from multiple agencies that we're hearing about all that one-time money that I want to remind everybody that was so significant last year. And unfortunately, we did so many great things with that much money, but it was not reoccurring. It was one-time surplus excess dollars that we may not ever see again in that large amount of capacity. And the intent was to do specific items. But we all agree in here, and I believe that DCFS would agree, that we need to do a better job of providing a place, a shelter for women and children. And I guess there are possibilities of men and children. It's pretty rough women, too. For an opportunity for everyone to have a place of safety when they're in a bad environment. Don't look at me, Miss Butler. Rough women. But
I would like us to be fact
Please.
oriented when we do that. What are the real needs? Where can those shelters best be provided, and how much is really needed? The one-time money, but that one-time money always leads to maybe a reduced, but a sustaining issue to help that. And so we just want to be a good partner. Some of those decisions are really over our pay grade, to be honest with you. But we want to be a solid partner for y'all and provide any information that we can provide to y'all that will be helpful for y'all to make good decisions.
And so also, I've had at-length conversations with staff on the opportunities for children to have resources available to them for food during the summer. And there was a program that existed that I was not aware of, and I don't think very many of our locals are aware of it. It was a USDA program, and there are guaranteed two meals now, not 44 cents per meal. That, as I appreciate it, that's all the 71 million was going to generate. I was an advocate for that as well with my colleagues, that I wanted to see that EBT program this summer. But after I got to doing the research necessary, I recognized that there are many other programs, but this one program specifically I learned about, and this was from congressional staff that I reached out to about feeding the children this summer, because I had so many members and so much public input, that there was a USDA program that is available that will give 2 meals per day delivery or pickup. Not sending a check to somebody, not adding it to their car or any of that. I'm talking about where they can have it delivered or picked up. And I didn't even know it existed. And look, and I have to say, I like that. I mean, because that's 2 complete meals and not just a few cents towards a meal per child per day. But that is always going to be a sensitive issue in this committee when it comes to feeding the children. Obviously, with the support we've had for Grow the Good and other programs, I think that's a concerted effort of everyone in here. And once again, I know y'all are a new administration, and a lot of you are new. There may be some existing staff members that their roles have changed somewhat significantly. And so I do appreciate the challenges of this first year. You can bet the questions will get even better for next year because we have a lot of new members on this committee as well. One of the questions I had, and the Representative Zarang, I believe, was started on it. It was with the employees. Let me get to the slide on employee salaries. So on slide page 19, I see the state average for statewide salaries is 63,000, and on there you go. And DCFS, the average salary is 57,000, and that's for 2024. And if you go back and look, it's pretty much stayed $6,000 or $7,000 below the statewide average. Would you agree that that is a significant reason why you can't get or can't maintain that level of employees that we need to maintain within DCFS?
I think Representative Lyons actually kind of nailed part of it, and it's multifactorial. A lot of the answers that I get, to be perfectly candid, is, in fact, I asked this morning, and I found out about an employee that had left. I said, why did they leave? And they said, because they didn't feel supported. And it wasn't pay, it wasn't the hard work, it wasn't the long hours, it wasn't the sacrifice of family. It was what they felt like was a lack of support. And so we have very, very aggressively set out to figure out what does support look like from the perspective of those most impacted by it. In other words, I don't want to tell them what I think support is. I got my opinions. I want a line worker to tell me, what does support look like to you? What does it feel like? What does it? And then I want to set about gain input from others as well, from the families, the biological families, the foster families, the children, our own workers up the line, and figure out how to reallocate our resources within the agency to try to provide that frontline support. Morale, engagement, good communication is key to it. Salary is important. I don't want to leave that out. Obviously, it's a big part of it. Caseloads, the number of workers that we have. There are a lot of good programs that we can do. There's a lot of good things that we can do. State general funds are limited, and we have to treat those just very preciously and make sure that we're allocating those to address those attrition issues. Because if you lose a person within the first 6 months that they've gotten there, you've lost it, because we don't, any new job, we're all new, but they're new too, and it takes a lot of training to be very good at that and experience, and there's no substitute for training and experience and support. And after somebody's been there 10 years, 5 years, they become very, very good at it. And so we need to support them. The answer is, I ask people, line people that every day, and I'm getting those caseloads and support.
I got one final question. On slide 12, if you would. So
I'm not smart enough to move these, but I'm going to look up there.
There you go. So in the state general fund, it's an increase of 14.4 million, and that's to expand the capacity of therapeutic foster care. It says specifically for New Orleans and Baton Rouge. There's an additional 19.4 million for federal funds. Why is it specifically only Baton Rouge and New Orleans? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. So I think it is. So that it's kind of lumped together. So there was an increase for the rates for therapeutic foster care and congregate care. There's also an increase for the supplemental staffing contract. That specifically is Baton Rouge and New Orleans.
Okay,
Yep. I think it's maybe how it's just
the
written
way
in
I'm
that
reading
bullet.
it.
Correct.
I got you.
It is lumped together. It's several things, but it's lumped together. Like what he said was correct, that it's the therapeutic foster care is one thing, contract care is one thing, and then supplemental staffing in New Orleans and Baton Rouge is one thing.
Okay. I just want to know why Baton Rouge, New Orleans was getting everything again. Okay,
Mr. Chairman, there's one other thing. I'm at 30 seconds.
yeah.
I promise. A lot of good work has been done over the last year and a half or so by the people who were there long before I was there. And the fruits of that have not begun to play out just yet. This body and your cohorts down the hall were integral in helping with a lot of that, but it was also a lot of it generated internally. There's going to be some good generated out of that. There's going to be a tendency to say, well, the credit goes to the new team or the new guy, or even the new governor, who I adore, I love, I admire him. He's a great leader. But I want to remember that a lot of the hard work, we're going to be reaping what some other people have sown. And I want y'all to remember that if there's a tendency as the months fold out. There's a ton of really good program. I'm having a hard time coming up with some ideas, other than in the area that Representative Lyons was addressing and you were addressing about morale and support. And even in those areas, there's a lot of good that's been done, and it just takes. I've learned state governance is not quite as agile as I'm used to. Y'all get ready, new folks. I'm telling you, it takes a long time to turn a big ship. It takes a longer time to bring it up. And so let's give those folks who've been doing that work a little credit, because they've done some really great things. And I want us all to remember that, honestly.
Okay. One final question, Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's really for you. Do you think staff could send us an email about those USDA programs for us to be able to share within our district with our leaders?
I will. I got all that from, I actually got that from the congressional level.
You mentioned that.
Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate you doing the research. So I'm just asking if you could share the research with the rest of us, because
And
that was
ironically-
a very good update. So I appreciate you.
Yeah,
and your
I only
commitment
got
there.
that as of last Thursday.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
I mean, it's all new information. But when I found it out, I thought, well, man, this is significant, because this actually does more, and it requires no dollars from us. It has the potential to do more than the EBT program. But anyways, I'll gather all that.
I do appreciate that, and I think the general public may be listening in, and it'd be helpful for us to get that information.
Yeah.
What did she say? You want me to
You
repeat
may
that for
have
you,
to-
Rhonda? Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, I'm feeling abused.
We have a hotline. I'd suggest you not use it.
They teaming up on me. Is there any other comments? We appreciate you. Thank you very much. Motion's been made to adjourn. This is adjourned.
Thank you.